vacancies. So going back to January, we had started to explore different ways of engaging organisations and volunteers, and what our volunteer centre might look like, because we're looking to merge the two together, provide a new volunteering platform. We'd started and hosted our first volunteer recruitment fair in St Mary's, which was really a really good event, and it kind of paved the way, really. And then we'd started planning February, putting the portal bones together and things. And then March hit. And of course, the COVID crisis started. Sally, at that time, we kind of like looked to you as our steer for those times ahead. What were your thoughts on how our organisation could best support the boroughs? Were there any tools that you thought we might be leaning on, or skills or expertise through the team?
So I suppose one of the things that strikes me about the kind of second or third week in March was how normal circumstances almost, or normal arrangements, were dispensed with, and particularly in St Helens, people, partners mobilised really quickly. I suppose in terms of volunteering, that scene you just set there, Claire, in terms of our work and how we were trying to modernise our volunteering offer, was like almost, you know, a bit like serendipity, wasn't it? It was almost that at that moment in time, we had a new way of working, a new and easier way of engaging people into volunteering. And so because we were able to work with colleagues at Volunteer Kinetic, and because we were already in the space where we were thinking differently about volunteering, we were able to mobilise very quickly. And I think that tool, that system has been sort of transformational, alongside obviously the efforts of our staff team in working differently and working more creatively, and clearly the efforts of the hundreds of volunteers who've given up their time. That tool, I would say, has been transformational to the speed with which we could respond to local people's needs and to volunteers. And you know, we did a bit of learning, and there were some amendments and some changes, and people have accrued hundreds of hours of toil doing it. But we, in the end, I think that was the kind of key factor for us. And once we'd ironed out some of those things that were taking longer in the process with Volunteer Kinetic, who I think really, we've had lots of experience as an organisation of working with private sector organisations with a product or tool that they're interested in selling, and not always had great experiences with that. But I think the work that Volunteer Kinetic have done, particularly in amending and helping evolve that tool and product to meet the needs in this crisis, has been absolutely critical. And I think the other thing that's been really critical has been the support of our two councils. So, you know, particularly in St Helens very initially, and then in Holton, as we took a little bit of the learning into the conversations, the colleagues that we've worked directly with have helped us get an additional bit of money that meant that we could focus staff in the two areas, that we could focus on volunteering. That's been absolutely instrumental in terms of responding.
Yeah.
We've had to think differently, haven't we? Sorry, Annie, go.
I was just going to say, absolutely agree with Sally. I think for me, in St Helens, that flexibility with the tool that, you know, we've got, the resource, and how quickly it enabled us to connect was absolutely vital, really. And I don't think we would have done as good a job as we did so early on without that tool. It wouldn't have looked anything like, and I still think there'll probably, you know, people still needing support that we wouldn't have got to. So I do think it's been critical, and a great resource. From my background, not necessarily coming in from volunteering previously, and then just suddenly needing to be in that area of work. Without that tool, it would have been a lot more difficult. So yeah, I'd agree with what Sally said. It's been instrumental in us being able to kind of meet that demand. Really.
Anybody else want to kind of like jump in there in terms of the tool, the Team Kinetic approach? I mean, thankfully, I think we were at a point, Sally, for me in February and early March, where I'd done quite a lot of the groundwork in prepping that tool ready, and it was clean. I'm not sure what it would have looked like had we been trying to use that tool sort of like 6 months down the line. How we might have supported organisations in using it in a different way. I think the fact that we could steer the recruitment process specifically for COVID helped us. And we're going to have to adapt that, I think, going forwards. But I mean, I know I nearly had a nervous breakdown at some point in March, trying to kind of manage all the technical glitches and working with the team at Team Kinetic in terms of developing the community task dashboard. But there were times right at the very beginning, sort of like late March, early April, that I can remember talking to people who needed help, spending half an hour on the phone to them, and then spending another half an hour talking to volunteers and matching them up, and the way that the tools developed has enabled us to, not saying not have those conversations, because I think they're very important in terms of that connection with people, but actually speed things up so we could do more of that.
Yeah.
Can I just jump in and say that this is all completely new to me? I've never really, we do have Healthwatch volunteers, but I've never had an awful lot to do with the recruitment or management of volunteers. And when we were brought on to help with this, I found the portal and the way it developed quite quickly from the time I got involved just fantastic. Obviously with amazing support from yourself, Claire and Annie, in getting my head around it and my team's head around it, but it was incredibly easy to use. How it developed quite quickly was, as you said, it cut down the time we were spending finding volunteers, which again was completely new to me, and I can see us as a Healthwatch using that Team Kinetic portal in the future to try and recruit more volunteers for us. Incredibly easy to use, and really it wasn't a problem getting used to using it in any way.
And that's a good point, that, Jane, because essentially once we've kind of got to where our new normal is, the whole point of that portal was around our offer in terms of the volunteer centre, in what we can do for our members in terms of supporting them recruiting and managing their volunteers better. So I'm really excited about getting to that point, when it's not only just used for what's happening at the moment, but actually we can start supporting our member groups to kind of come on board and utilise that portal for themselves to be able to manage their volunteers. Because I think what's really good is that because we've got that first-hand experience, we can talk about it now to the groups that we're working with. We can tell them what that experience is like, and all the different kind of things they can do with it in terms of finding out about the volunteers, communicating with their volunteers, and promoting certain opportunities at certain times, and all of the additional bits that go with that portal. So looking forward to that bit now, I think, as well.
Me too.
Before we go on to talk about the future using the portal, if I can just chip in with my experiences back in March, it was quite an anxious time, as Sally says, and I think that the two councils had different philosophies, and I don't say this is a criticism of either of them. I think with St Helens together, the feeling I had was that there was right, let's get this project started, let's start helping people. We make mistakes, we'll apologise for it, but let's get this ball rolling. And in Halton, where I was part of the conversation, there was a determination that we get things right before we start. And I do remember thinking at one point, Annie and your guys in St Helens, you've done like over 100 voluntary opportunities. You'd had all this food delivered. You'd had messages from Johnny Vegas and Russell Crowe about how it was, and we hadn't started in Holton, and that was a tremendously anxious time. But I think once we got going, I think it's been an absolute triumph, and the ease with which we can upload information to the portal, and that then reaches our volunteers so that they can respond to it. It's been incredible, and it's not an exaggeration to say that over the past couple of months, when we post a voluntary opportunity in Holton, and we're just shy of 200 at the moment, I honestly think 95% of them are taken within that first hour. Absolutely. So if as a resident you're asking for support with shopping, someone's taking it within an hour, and the vast majority of cases, that task, whether it's shopping or dog walking, is being performed on that same day, which is a pretty remarkable state of affairs.